Welcome to this week's VIN-dow podcast. This week, Bob compares gardening to a successful used car inventory at your dealership.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's VIN-dow with Robert Hollinshead. Bob, you once told me that dealerships should think of their inventory almost like a garden. I wonder if you could just dive into that and do a little deep dive into that for us today.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Because my interest in gardens, it's over decades, actually many decades. The comparison actually is ridiculous as it seems. It's a one-to-one relationship. So when you think about it, your garden plot basically is about the size of your what you have to work with, right? So a dealer's lot is basically he's locked into whatever he has. It's a 30-car lot, it's a 500-car lot, whatever it is. So it's a little tiny plot in front of your or back of your house, or it's a 10-acre situation where you can stock as many as you want and so forth, right? But when you think about it, right, gardens are unbelievably in need of attention, or they turn into like a mess. I won't use other adjectives, but if you're not on top of your garden constantly, it'll run you over, and it has no mercy. So it's not like you can attend to it once and then next week you're not overrun with weeds and things that are croaking and that needs to be watered and all the rest fertilized, etc., mulched, right? Certain things come at different times of the year where you got to be careful to pull the dahlia bulbs out and make sure they're put away correctly, etc. So when you think about the relationship of a garden to your dealership, right, your inventory, your investment, it actually is identical, right? What grows or what is actually sellable in your particular plot, your lot, your demographic, your sphere of influence, let's say, understanding your demographic, right? Understanding who, even though you wish it would be a different customer, who you have as customers, regardless of how you actually advertise on the internet, et cetera, right? It all boils down to you can't rely on adverse selection in a garden, because what you wind up with is things that don't grow, things that don't become productive, things that actually don't make any sense, and the next thing you know, you don't have any kind of production. So it's a one-to-one relationship with understanding climate conditions, your lot, who's around it, etc. Right? What would grow? You can't grow palm trees in Boston. They won't live. They'll only live for 3 months until the frost comes. It's over. It's done. Right? So in other words, you can't grow good tomatoes in South Florida on the ocean. They won't grow here. Doesn't work, right? Even though you'd love to, you just can't do it. They don't grow. So when you're talking about your inventory and what's necessary to actually pay attention to on a daily, weekly basis, you got to pull the weeds. Notice weeding actually is related to making a hard decision. First, you got to be able to identify a weed, because sometimes a plant looks like a weed, but you're not even sure. So if the person that's weeding isn't aware of it's a plant or it's a weed, you could be killing yourself. What that would mean is you're not handling your inventory in a way that you actually have identified specifically what the unit is and how it will react in your climate. Does that make any sense so far, Sean?
I'm there. Yep. You got to have what grows, what's sellable, understanding your demographic.
Yeah. And your space. So it's 40 cars. You can't get 80 cars in. So it's a quarter-acre plot. You can't even get tractors in to plow and sow and so forth, right? So it's a question of what's going to be the best for that particular location, and then how you identify which plants are going to produce the most, right? These are things that take it one step further than just naturally letting things happen on their own, right? Where as a person like ourselves in the car business, actually understanding a lot of different things, who your gardener is going to be, who's actually in charge of pulling the weeds and planting what they're planting, and seeing how long it takes for them to produce, et cetera, right? So if you have a bad acquisition manager, if you have a bad gardener, you wind up with circumstances that shouldn't be the way they are, but you didn't optimize, right? So optimizing not only where you're sourcing, what you're sourcing, and how you're sourcing it, but then how you get it ready, right? What mulch are you putting down? Like, what are you doing to get them ready? You got to choose the right things that you do. You can't overdo it. If you overdo it, you're going to overspend on everything, and you're never going to be able to make money on anything because you did, let's say, what the textbook told you to do, et cetera. And the textbook might not understand that in order to wind up with a profit, you have to use, let's say, a little bit of different analysis of your specific plot. You follow me? I would say when we talk about the maintenance of gardens, how you actually water it. So watering is what I actually consider, when it could be either the car's going to the auction or the car's, ready for retail. Either one, you're actually getting it ready for marketplace. So you have to be prepared to actually present it in its best, constantly be ready to put it in its best face forward, right? So that means not just weeding, but also watering. That means washing the cars and sticking your nose inside them to make sure that they don't smell like a rat's rear end, because even though you cleaned it yesterday and you left it wet on the inside, next thing you know, you put your nose inside, it smells like a church basement that somebody defecated in, right? And as a result, if you're not aware of that, right, then the garden's going to overwhelm you, right? So you have invasive species that wind up coming in. You can't figure out why it's not working for you, right? So that means the vigilance that's necessary in your inventory, identical to the garden, right? And putting it into action on a regular basis, it optimizes your plot. You dig? In other words, you only have X number of spots. Most people have, limitations on what they can plant, what they can stock, right? They have limitations. You only have $8 million for inventory. You only have $400,000 floor plan for inventory. Therefore, if you don't optimize, you wind up with all sorts of things overgrowing other things. In other words, where you actually place those items inside the garden on your lot, what you're putting there, is it overwhelming the other things that are around it? I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's about creating your own critical mass of balance and of, what can grow in the shade, what can't grow in the shade, right? So in other words, trying certain exotic species that, may or may not work, knowing you took a risk, they may or may not work. That would be going outside. Maybe it's going to your heart. You're like, you feel, you happen to have, even though you're ignoring your own particular plot, you're drawn personally, emotionally to a certain couple types of cars. That happens to all car people, because we wouldn't be in the car business if there wasn't some sort of emotional attachment to certain things. Now, you could say, well, I'm not emotionally attached to anything, but it happens to be horse manure. You follow me? Because it jumps back to what we talked about the other day in terms of a double take, right? Everybody loves a double take. You look at something because you can't believe how good looking it is, and therefore you're looking again. So therefore you can be drawn to things that might be outside of the realm of what your garden can bear, but because of the double take effect and understanding the risk that goes with double take, you just planted a bird of paradise in let's say North Carolina, where the probability of it living is extraordinarily slim, but you just want to give it a shot, right? And when you give it a shot, it may turn out that because your emotional attachment to a bird of paradise, right, may bleed over to a customer that also has a specific, like physical or emotional attachment to that bird of paradise, referring to a certain category of car. It might be outside of that garden's, let's call it their middle meat of what they do. This creates, in my estimation, we see it in the lanes all the time, an emotional relationship that rubs off on all other cars that you're selling, right? So a plot that turns out to be good looking because you got all sorts of varied things, but they're all organized correctly and they're all standing exactly correct. They're pruned correctly. They're blooming in a, let's call it a rotating cycle. So you always have color. You always have, And of course, as spring, fall, winter, here we are in a completely insane wholesale marketplace, but you still need to be aware of the, let's call it the double take effect of what you're planting in your garden. You follow me? In other words, if you were driving by, it wasn't your place, would you be inclined to take a double take on on that particular lot? See, the double take also aligns with the garden concept. After you drive by once, oh my goodness, look at that, it's good looking, and you do it again, you do it again. Next thing you know, you've actually wound up creating a subliminal attraction, because it wasn't, let's say, something that's ugly, it's something that's good looking, that garden, right? Your lot, right? Where over time, that's and the traffic count is 1,100 cars a day. So over time, that subliminal attraction, the customer doesn't even need to be thinking about it necessarily. All right. More importantly, when he's on your website taking a peek, and there's a certain rhythm to that garden. You see what I'm saying to you? In other words, presentation. In other words, how one looks to the other, et cetera, so we can actually understand this is not a random garden. This is a well-designed, well-maintained, well thought through garden lot, right? In other words, the next thing you wind up with is a longitudinal elevation of the garden, of your lot. It requires unbelievable dedication, first intelligence, to be aware of certain things. It's not like today, I got to go find 20 cores today. Okay, so that's, now that's hunter mentality. You got to go get them, and you really do. You got to do that. But then the bigger picture is taking one step, two steps backwards, and looking down at the, how you actually created your garden, your canvas, how you want to paint, what you want to represent on your canvas to the viewer, right? Your potential customer. So this leads, it doesn't have to be like only somebody that's doing exotic highline cars, because obviously that's a small percentage of people, and they don't do any volume anyway, do no volume anyhow. It works for them, for sure it works, but it also works for the sharecropper, the guy that's got a 20-car lot. You follow me? In other words, understanding how you present it, and it rubs off on the other one. It's how that garden is actually on a daily basis presented to your customers. It's exactly what we do in an auction setting. It's how you've actually created the need for a buyer. If they like you, they don't like you. They can't avoid the fact that what you're presenting, your garden, is it's an attractive circumstance. So we use the critical mass concept. If we have 120 Lexuses tomorrow, it's the only place in the world, including any Lexus sale, we can go look at 120 Lexuses, and we lay them out in a certain way that it's very clear. They're trade-ins. They're not from another auction. They're cars that are definitely 100% getting sold. So we're not going to waste anybody's time once you pay admission to get in, and you're paying attention. You give us the respect of paying attention. You're definitely going home with cars. There's zero question about that, right? And as a result, you wind up with a couple thousand dealers willing to waste their time, but they're not wasting their time, because even if they don't buy, they can see it's not anybody shooting with blanks. We're shooting with live ammunition. Win, lose, or draw. We're shooting, and we're willing to sell to the market. This is at a wholesale level. If you think it's any different on the retail level, it's a brain fart. In other words, from a retail standpoint, it's a little bit different, but it's exactly the same as what we're talking about is, creating critical mass, a reason why they come to you. I'm going to give you another example of a garden, which isn't a garden. It happens to be a men's store. It's called Boyd's in Philadelphia. They've been there for 100 years. And people that go to Boyd's know when you go there, you're going for a suit. Well, most people go because they need a suit for a wedding or a tuxedo for the thing or whatever it is, right? And when you go there and you're going specifically for one reason, right? Because in their garden, they got certain things. They're definitely there, and they got them like all different ranges of prices and qualities and so forth. So when you're going, you're getting it. But let me explain to you what happens. Here's how it works. They're not in a good location. They're in Center City, so you can't park. It's really like a destination where you got to get out of it's like a day trip, when you go there. But when you go there, you don't go for a suit and come home with a suit. You go there for a suit and you come home with 9 shirts, 4 belts, by the way, you follow me? Maybe even a pair of shoes, 6 pairs of socks, and possibly the suit that you went for. It's because of critical mass. In other words, they align, they present in a way where the attraction, even though the price is totally ridiculous, right, doesn't make any difference because now you're in an emotional circumstance where you found things you can't find anyplace else because they understand what grows in their garden. And in other words, they're in business, forever, for the simple reason of exactly what we're talking about, and that absolutely 100% rubs off onto car dealerships. Kerbeck Cadillac, used Cadillacs, did it for decades, many decades, where obviously it's a loss leader out front, but when you get there, the closing rate is, I don't know, 85%, 90%, only because you can't leave because they got everything that you could possibly want, and they know exactly how to work all the way through. So they don't have Nissan Sentras along with Altimas and things like this. No, what they have is when you go there, everything you could possibly imagine about what you were looking for, right? And they're smart enough when they trade adverse selection, they don't even make an effort to sell it. What they do is get it ready and put it in a marketplace where they sell 100% for 40 years at the auction. In other words, they make a wholesale profit only because they traded a car on what the person came for them to recondition that and then try to grow that in their garden. No, what you've done is you've ruined critical mass. You've destroyed your garden. In other words, you've confused the people driving by 1,100 times going to the shore and then finally saying, I'm going to get a Cadillac. You ain't going someplace else to get a Cadillac. You're going there because they got them all. This is a one-off example, but it is specifically to a larger or greater sense the same thing with a guy with a 10-car lot or the person with 5 locations and 900 cars in stock. You see what I'm saying to you? It's basically understanding what happens in a garden. You see, it's weird to think about it like that because, first of all, who has time to even listen to this insanity and then put it into action until you're doing one of those drives going from A to Z and you're thinking about something and you're not thinking about anything. So you start thinking about this, a garden in your lot, and how one relates to the other. And then how, over time, would we learn to understand what grows there when it actually blooms so we know that it's coming at the right time in combination with other things in that garden where it becomes a really attractive thing. Because what you're really doing is building your own brand. You're building a brand that actually over time will deliver fruit. You dig. In other words, over time, of course, you got to advertise on everybody's websites, and you have to do Google Words, and you got to do Facebook Marketplace. You got to do all that stuff. You got to do all that stuff. No question about it. But if you think that exists in a void, once again, you haven't taken 30 seconds to think about it. It doesn't. It's what happens when you get to the garden and you say, oh my God, honey, this is unbelievable. Look how beautiful this is. It's incredible. Who designed this? I can't even believe they have this. It's growing here. Look at it. It's amazing. And the combination of colors. See, so what happens is it's different. When you get to it could be, again, at the auction or in a retail circumstance, how you actually present what you have as a direct relationship in the endorphins in the customer's brain, wholesale or retail, by the way, to understand, are they willing, able, and not just to pull a trigger today, but and then become part of, the things that happen to be habitual. In other words, when you think of X, you think automatically of Y, right? Because there's a Pavlovian connection between, risk reward and a behavioral reward, right? Where when the customer gets to you, it's not a waste of their time, and we're not giving an arrogant statement. Well, you think we have everything? Well, you want that? Do you think we bought it for free? In other words, all of the things that repulse a customer, when we eat those words and just think just for a second empathetically in their position, how would you feel when you got there, right? See, this is how we design our gardens, and what we actually do in the remarketing business is think about the other person. Not to the point where, it's like obvious or ridiculous, right? But you got to put yourself in the position of your customer, because if you don't do that, initially at the one-on-one each transaction, it could be painful. But when you think about the broader picture, are you going to be in business for the next 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years? And now we're selling electric cars and all the rest of the nonsense comes along with that. That's got nothing to do with it. The question becomes, how are you actually going to make the commitment to your garden? You dig it, you got to fertilize it. You got to water the plants. Watering the plants means you're washing the cars, right? If you don't wash the cars look like hell. Next thing you know, your investment's worthless. When I say wash it, I'm talking about reconditioning to the point of one step away from death. In other words, making it better looking. And I don't care if it's a junk or if it's a new Rolls Royce, better looking, more attractive, smells better. In other words, the flowers that smell the best get the most activity, right? When those lilies are popping or the astilbes are popping, next thing you know, like you're walking past them subliminally. You're just going back there because it's a rewarding thing. So when you're actually presenting your cars lined up correctly and shining beyond wherever they're ever going to shine again, I don't care who buys it. It can't look better in his garage someday 3 weeks from now than what it looked like when you presented it in your garden. Is it resonating anything at all, Sean? Does it make any sense, or is it completely ludicrous?
I had you on mute, Bob, but I was my way through the whole conversation. So really, really good, and I want to thank you for laying that out for everybody, and perfectly in time for spring too. So thank you.
You got it. Have fun, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week for more straight talk about the auto industry.